is the government with or against you on uranium mining over there? And how high do you think the probability is of you witnessing a change in government sentiment, or maybe a change in government in the period during which you plan on operating the Dasa mine?
Well, those are good questions. For your listeners, Niger is the fifth largest uranium producer in the world. France gets 30% of their supply from Niger. Of course, it's a former French colony, now independent, a Republic of Niger. So it's got a long history of uranium mining, and it's really gone uninterrupted as far as the mining cycle is and it goes, because the mines were started in about 1970, 1971, and they've been running right up to present day. They had two operations there called Somer and Cominac. Cominac, because of ore exhaustion after 50 years, shut down in March of last year. Somer is still running. The Chinese are also there with a mine called Azalik. There's another big Orano project called Imuraran that they're currently working on. So it's really a uranium jurisdiction, and it's similar to the Athabasca Basin in Canada. It's a big sedimentary basin, but it's very underexplored because there hasn't been really too much activity in that basin, because previous to 2005, 2007 time period, the French basically had a lockup on that whole area. The governments have come in and they've opened up to new foreign investment. The government's very supportive of uranium mining because it provides the bulk, I would say close to 70% of their GDP comes from uranium mining. So it is the major revenue source for the country. Now, recently, they've discovered oil there as well. So the Chinese built a big $5 billion oil refinery project in the country. So they're now producing their own oil. There's also gold mining there and other minerals. So really, it's a mining-friendly jurisdiction. And we started going there in 2005 with our initial investigations, signed our deals in 2007. So now I've been there for 17 years. And we have 4 uranium deposits. The big one, of course, the Dasa project that we've now completed a feasibility study on, and it's in the construction phase currently. The government, to answer that question, was just re-elected, or new elections were held last year. So now we have a new government in place for 2. The way they work it in Niger, they have similar to the United States, they have 2 4-year terms. So there would be another election in 4 years. If the same incumbent government gets reelected, then they're there for 2 terms of 4 years. So really, we don't foresee any issues with the government, with changing politicians. There's a very well-defined mining code there that we're working under that was adopted in 2007. So really, as a good, solid African country that can produce uranium, it's one of the best in Africa.
Okay, thank you for that overview. And why I asked you that, Mr. Roman, is because if my memory serves me here, which it rarely does, but if I'm getting it right this time, Orano, which you mentioned back in the days, Areva was, well, they were having some issues, right? They were applying for a license renewal, and that didn't go as smoothly. You know, they were slowed down by the government specifically, but also by like thousands of protesters. You know, there were groups of students and general citizens who they basically didn't want Areva to get a license renewal. There was a car bombing. The French sent in the special forces to protect the mine. Then Oxfam came in, said that Areva should pay more to the Niger government, and that these things sort of happened multiple times. And they even had to put 2 of their mines on care and maintenance for a couple of months. As the government simply, what it came down to is that the government wanted a larger piece of their earnings as they were making money. And it was making the renewal of the license an issue. That's how I understood the situation. But then even after that, the protesters didn't even stop, right? Like workers went on strikes. There were class action lawsuits in the US and on and on. And so the whole situation sounded like a big headache. So give me some rope here, by the way, Mr. Roman. And correct me if I'm wrong, by the way. But what if when the uranium price goes in, say it goes back to the last time highs, 140 or even half of that, let's say, yeah, let's be more realistic, or whatever you want to call it. Let's say it does half of that, $70. That's still twice the price of what you calculated on your PEA. I believe you did it at $35, right?
The feasibility study, yes.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, then you'd be making a lot of money at $70. That's what it comes down to. So what if the Niger government then decides that it wants, I don't know, better roads and better schools, and because you're the one making money, you're the one who has to pay up for them? Is that something I should be worried about? Is that even possible?
Okay, so first of all, on the first item, there was about 10 years ago, there was some insurrection in the country, I would say, that involved the Tuaregs that are in the north, where we are, and the Niamey government in the south. So the Tuaregs felt left out. They felt, the country is making money in our region. We're the ones that are working up here, and the centralized government in Niamey is keeping a lot of this money. And so there was a big protest. That's one item to talk about. The second item, part of your dialogue, was the issues that Orano had. There was a lot behind that. So I don't want to expound on what happened there, but let's put it this way: the government was not happy with some of the operating methods that Areva was running at the time. And so they got into a big discussion about what to do about it. And I guess they made an agreement that allowed Orano to keep operating. It gave the government a larger portion of the pie. And they've been basically running ever since. They had that shutdown period while these negotiations were ongoing. But in all purposes, I mean, the mines really have been running for about 50 years and providing a lot of revenue to the government. I don't think it was all initiated by the government. I think it was, it takes two to tango, and there were some issues caused by the company, and there were some issues caused by the government, and they resolved those. There have been some attacks against French people in the country because, really, as former colonial masters, there's a lot of resentment to French people in Niger, I would say. The population realizes that they're there, and obviously they're appreciative of all the employment, the revenue, but there's still a lot of people that don't like them. And sometimes that comes to the forefront when you have attacks. But generally speaking, we're a Canadian company. We're well regarded in the country. As I say, I've been there 17 years. We've never had an issue. I'd like to keep it that way. The government views this area as very strategic, so they have, of course, a lot of military in the Timor-Soy Basin, including a French base in Arlit and an American base in Agadez. So we feel that the area is quite secure, and from our point of view, we should be able to build our project, start production, and provide a meaningful amount of jobs in the country, replace a lot of jobs that were lost at Cominac, but also a huge amount of revenue to the Niger government. So that leads into your other question about would they come in and take more or want more, etc. Right now, the way the tax situation is put together under the mining code, the corporate taxes are 30%. So they're on the high side globally. So 30% is quite a big chunk that they would take. There is a 3-month tax holiday, and you get to, of course, recover your capital. And then the government starts taking its 30% share. But right off the bat, there's also a sliding scale royalty. So on every pound of uranium you produce, depending on profitability, you get charged anywhere from 5.5% up to 12% royalty. So, when you look at this thing in whole, they're making money off the royalties right away. Then they make money off of the corporate taxes. So then they make money off of their employment taxes. So in actual fact, the government is taking a huge chunk of the revenue stream from the project.
Mm. So they're already taking their portion. Okay, that makes sense. And also fair point. When the happenings that I was referring to, I should have put a date. I was talking about they happened between 2013, 2014, and it's actually since then that the Fraser Institute has dropped the country from its studies. So last time that they did it, I think, was 2015. And it also didn't do too well, by the way, back then. So it scored, it scored in the bottom 10 mining jurisdictions worldwide, mainly because of policy perception index. That's what it was drawing it down. So you just told me that the government has changed since. I'm looking out to see that study, by the way, for 2021 should be coming in shortly. But what do you think specifically has changed since 2015 onward to today, Mr. Roman?
Well, I've been there, as I said, 17 years. I've gone through, now we're on to our third government since I've been there.
Mm.
So we know all of the players. We make it a point to meet everyone that's in power. The mines ministers have changed. The presidents have changed. We've met them all, worked with them all. They realize that we are international investors that are putting money into their country to develop their assets. I think, generally speaking, they're very appreciative and they're very supportive. So we haven't had any issues in that regard since I've been there.
And that's how you expect it to
Well, I would
stay.
expect that it would stay the same. I mean, it's not in their interest to delay or cause complications to the project, because that impacts directly them and
It
all
does.
of the people that want jobs. Don't
Mm.
forget, in Arlit, you had 2 mines, Cominac and Somer. Now you've only got Somer. So what are all those people doing?
Mm.
They're waiting around for us to get started so we can hire them. So I think, the government knows that, and they want us to get the project started as soon as possible.
I mean, if I were in their case, I'm getting 30% dividend sort of on it, and a sliding scale royalty, I'd be wanting to start too. And on a separate note, my friend Menachem actually makes a good point on what else has changed since, sort of in maybe in a negative direction. And by the way, fair disclosure, I'm a shareholder of your company. Menachem is also a shareholder of the company. But so he reminded me that food prices and energy prices are obviously on the rise, and in jurisdictions that are as sensitive to wealth gaps, so to call it, as Niger, he mentioned that could escalate unrest and aggression towards maybe the companies who, I would guess people might be looking at as making money off their pain when food prices and energy are rising. And then what else is new also that could escalate some of the aggression is that the French have moved their army out of Mali and have increased their military cooperation, I guess is what they called it in the news, which is well, that's basically, I looked at what people think about it on Twitter, for example. It's speculated to have the potential to lead to civil unrest as well, and troubles at the borders of the country. So what do you think about those two issues, Mr. Roman, about rising prices of energy and food? And then you also have the Mali problems that the French had.
Well, I think food and energy, of course, that's a global issue. Niger is lucky that it has the Niger River flowing through it, and there's a lot of agriculture. Up where we are, there's some small market gardens. We expect to actually encourage and enhance that. We're involved with some NGOs in the country that have just started a center called the Dove Center. It's named after Dove Pasternak from Israel, who really conquered the idea of growing food in the desert. And so we're working in collaboration with that NGO and another American NGO to train people on how to do it up in our region to start new businesses. So local farmers can and people that live in the region can start growing value-added crops that they can use for themselves, but also to make money selling it to the mining companies like ourselves.
Mm.
So we're looking at the situations like that, and the diet in Niger is pretty basic. They eat a lot of millet and sorghum, rice, and things like that. Pretty much an African-style starchy diet. Cassava. These things are all things that can grow locally. So that's really what they do. I think from the president's point of view, Niger, as president of Niger, the population there has grown substantially, and of course he's trying educational programs to try to educate people that you might have to control yourself and not have such a huge family because the country can only support so many people. I think with our project and with all the initiatives we've started on the ESG front and helping people to learn how to grow in the desert and cultivate and do these things, it's going to be very, very beneficial to local people and generating income for themselves and also food. So it's these are things that we are working on.
Okay. What about the other thing? The French moving their army out of Mali and
Well, the
increasing.
French moving their army out of Mali, they've actually said that they are going to focus their efforts in Niger.
Yeah.
So of course they've got a base in Arlit. They didn't really have a base in Mali. They were more there as a force to train local people, but they're not pulling out of Niger. And Orano has recently built a brand new office building in Niamey, so they're there for the long term, and I think their military will remain in West Africa, but have Niger as the base.
Mm.
So they're willing to do a lot for the region, and they have done a lot for the region. Sometimes local populations, again, they don't appreciate these efforts.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe Niger is more aligned with Western thinking, and they really appreciate the fact that they're there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair point. You know what? I'm sort of trying to challenge some of these. I'm trying to look what could go wrong, and let's maybe focus, because I know you're very, very bullish on Niger as a uranium mining jurisdiction. Let's maybe put it that way. Maybe even make a list if you feel like it. What specific advantages do you think that Niger gives you relative to, say, being in one of the other big jurisdictions, Canada, or, Australia is not yet a big jurisdiction, but let's say Canada or US or Australia. What advantages do you have?
Well, I think the biggest advantage, number one, is the location. So it's in an area where you don't have population, so it's a good area for mining. You're not displacing people. Another location or another advantage is, of course, quicker permitting timelines.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a myriad of bureaucracy to work through. We can go directly to the president or the mines minister and work out any issues we have and get them resolved quickly. So I think in Canada, for instance, my background was with Denison Mines. My father started that company, and I know how long it takes to permit projects in Canada on any mining project. And uranium is probably 4 times harder than a regular mining project. So when do these projects actually come on stream? This is the big issue. And, that's why I went to Niger in the first place, is because they were opening the doors to new foreign investment in 2005. The permitting timelines are quicker. They've got a fully trained workforce that's very familiar with uranium mining. So that's another thing in Canada that would be more difficult to find. You don't have First Nations issues, which they have both in Australia and in Canada.
Yep.
So there's quite a few benefits to be there.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that. I sort of like. I'm sort of a believer of no free lunches, and I sort of believe that everything has its price, and that's not bad, right? That's okay as long as you're paying the right price, as long as you're paying a reasonable price. So, what are maybe what's the price that you're paying for having those advantages? Quicker permitting and then not displacing people.
Well, yeah, I mean, typically African projects have a discount in their value,
I was mostly
market-wise.
talking
So
about the price. I'm sorry to interrupt here. I was mostly talking about,
yeah,
they're obviously cheaper. I was mostly talking about the price in terms of drawbacks. Like, we made a list of what are the good things, what are the pros, what are some of the cons of being in Niger?
it's far away for me to go there. Although the flights aren't bad, I typically go Toronto, Paris, Paris, Niamey, so it's not that bad. But oh, you know what? It really, from a point of view, I've worked all over the world, and it's really no worse or better than many other places I've worked. So it's just a matter of getting used to the culture, and you can pretty much get anything you need there. Other things are easy enough to import. So I can't say that there's a big standout negative. I would say from a point of view of speaking with investors, they always ask about the security situation. Clearly, Al Qaeda and Boko Haram have had an impact across the Sahel. And a lot of these guys were chased out of Afghanistan or Libya, and they're basically armed gangs. These people like to run drugs and various other things, military style weaponry, etc. They're gangs like ISIS that we all know about, right? Between the ECOWAS area, the Sahel region, all the countries have banded together. They've basically made a pact to try to stand up to these things. They don't like their peaceful citizens being killed indiscriminately by armed gangs. So that's a big plus for French forces. Canadian forces have been there. American forces, EU forces have all been there to help. They don't want to see all of Western Africa be destabilized and have terrorist gangs running around killing people. So this is the biggest bugaboo, so to speak, that we've had, is to convince people that you can have more killings in Chicago or Houston in one day than you would in all of Niger. So people still go to Chicago and Houston, even though there's hundreds of murders there on a monthly basis. So you have to keep it all in perspective. Clearly, the governments are aware of the problem. They're handling the problem. The forces now have been better equipped, better trained. And so if we can get the people convinced that security is solid, then I think more investors will flood into the region because they have a very good mineral endowment all across West Africa.
Yeah, I think following years we'll be seeing a lot more investments into Africa. It's at least my personal opinion. But let's I know you don't have too much time today here left, especially. So let's move on out of Niger for a minute here, and maybe discuss your Turkish zinc project for a while. I know that's a lot of